Welcome to the K Factor podcast, where we explore the real journey behind success, the struggle, the growth, and the lessons that shape who we become. I'm Rabbi Yehoshua Wordy, director of CHYE, a nonprofit dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and career seekers build the Keli for their parnasa and a life of purpose. Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome back to the K Factor podcast. This is our season 3 premiere, and this season we're excited to bring the K Factor to you in video format. At the K Factor, we focus on one mission, helping young people successfully transition into the business world. In every episode, we sit down with entrepreneurs from our community. They share their real stories, the wins, the struggles, and the lessons along the way. Our goal is simple, to give you the direction and inspiration as you build the Keli for your own parnasa journey. The K Factor is a division of Crown Heights Young Entrepreneurs. CHYE is a growing community-supported nonprofit that helps over 1,000 entrepreneurs and career seekers each year. We do that through one-on-one mentorship, career counseling, business education, live events, and practical resources. Together, these programs help people build meaningful and sustainable careers and businesses. Today, it takes about $500,000 a year to run this work, and this year we're working to double our impact by expanding programs and creating even more opportunities for the community. Before we jump in, I want to thank our inaugural sponsor, Ainsworth & Gorkin Law. Ainsworth & Gorkin is a full-service legal firm supporting small and mid-sized businesses across New York and New Jersey. They help entrepreneurs and companies navigate legal challenges, prevent disputes, and strengthen their contracts. Their guidance helps businesses grow, stay compliant, and protect themselves for the long term. And now, let's get into today's episode. In entrepreneurship, every journey is different, and every path comes with lessons. When I sat down with Moshe Hecht, a dynamic entrepreneur from our community, he shared insights that can inspire everyone looking to build their own business. In this conversation, we explore his journey from his early days in the Chabad system to becoming a successful entrepreneur, and we unpack the key lessons he learned along the way. So with that, let's jump into today's episode. Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back to the K Factor podcast. It's exciting to be here after a few years of hiatus. We're back. We want to bring you more entrepreneurs and more stories to help you listen, to get inspiration and get direction. And I'm excited to launch the podcast together with an amazing entrepreneur. And this is Moshe Hecht. At CHYE, we've had the privilege and the pleasure of watching Moshe go through his entrepreneur journey, and it's been a pretty incredible one. And his grit, determination, ingenuity, all of these things are things that we've watched unfold. And you like how he counted it out, and it's pretty incredible. I mean, he was a musician, and he was a marketer, and then he was in a startup currency, then he was part of charity, and now he's running his own operation, Hatch, and it's an incredible journey, and you'll learn a lot from hearing from Moshe's wisdom. On top of that, Moshe is a very articulate person, and so it's all the ingredients for an amazing conversation. So without further ado, we'll hop in. Welcome, Moshe, and in our classic fashion, we'd like to take people on a journey from the very beginning. So tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from yeshiva life into the business world.
How I transitioned. I'm still transitioning to take a bacher out of yeshiva, but you can't take yeshiva out of a person. So still working on that transition. So I went through the system, the Chabad system. It's interesting. I actually have 2 boys now, 15 and 17, that are in the system, and been having a lot of conversations with my wife and reflecting, about are we setting them up for life, to make a living, and to be, for success. And through this reflection, I continue to be a really big fan of the Chabad system. I really do. I think it first of all, it definitely sets you up spiritually. There's no question about that. Sets you up spiritually for life, which is obviously the most important thing. But there are so many elements in the system that set you up for life, for work and to make a parnasa. Nigla will set you up for critical thinking, and Chassidus will set you up for having a deep understanding of who you are and a deep understanding of the DNA of the world. If Tzayim will set you up for good sales, for good sales experience. I went through to Shlichus and Smicha, Mesifta, Zal, Shlichus. I went through the whole system, and I think it really does set up a balabas for a strong future. However, there are still gaps, and I experienced those gaps. If you go on shlichus, if we get to, I did do a little stint of shlichus. I think those gaps are smaller. You still have to learn maybe some accounting and some fundraising skills, but you already did that on shlichus. And if you go into a profession, you finish the system. You finish the system. You can always. Today, it's very popular. People are learning skills, going to law school and to medical school and to become an accountant and learning a business, getting a business degree. I think that's obviously really beautiful and ambitious. But to me, I kind of fell into the third category, which is, what do we call the organization is called young entrepreneurs. So the E is for entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs typically don't navigate towards shlichus in the system. And they also don't navigate to maybe a specific career that has a very, a clear path on how to excel in their career. And I fell into that third category, where wanting to be an entrepreneurial. Being an entrepreneur means wanting to create something from nothing, wanting to, develop a new service, a new product, innovate in work. So I fell into that category. I think in that category is probably the largest gap of what the system doesn't necessarily set you up for. Or at least you have to then fill that gap once you pass out of the system. And you asked me, how did I, find my early careers? The first many years, whether it was 7, 8 years, it's a learning. It's all that whole stage, that whole early 20 stage. You're getting an education through the roles that you are taking.
Okay, but what was your first role outside of the musician part, as a job?
I don't know if you know this. I actually, I don't think we've ever talked about this. I actually worked for the Allgemeiner Journal.
Yeah.
When it went English. David Efyun and I were classmates in yeshiva, and he had this big vision to turn the Allgemeiner into English and to become this big brand for Jewish voice. And he was good at the editorial department, and I was good at sales and marketing. So we worked together to launch that first English Allgemeiner, and then it became what it is today. It's actually, it's successful today. And he's moved on to become an editor in another paper. So I started to sell ad space for the Allgemeiner, and then I did other things. I started to from selling ads in the Allgemeiner, the companies that I would talk to, that I was selling ads to, when they sent me their ads, I'm like, these ads are terrible. I said, I can help you make better ads. Did I know how to make better ads? No, but I was, I had ambition, and I was a creative person. So that led me into marketing, and then things started to evolve. One thing I can say, kind of my anchor through this whole learning stage process of my 20s, was that because I knew that I was going into this entrepreneurial route, I knew that there were a few core things that I think I had. And I think maybe a lot of young people from CHYE come to me, whether you're sending them to me or meet them at events or whatever, and they ask me these, for some advice. So I tell them like this: there are probably 3 key ingredients that you need to have if you want to go on this entrepreneurial route. Otherwise, and I say this to them, either go on shlichus or go go into a career where there's a clear path of how to get to, whether it means going to school, whether it means taking classes, whether it means, taking a job with somebody for a specific thing. But if you want to go this entrepreneurial route, I think there are 3 key things. There are 3 key things that you need to accomplish this. The first thing is that you have to have a core ambition, right? In other words, and that's something that you can't teach that to a person. There has to be an unquenchable thirst for creating something, for innovating in something. So number 1 is an ambition, and that's not something that you can learn. It's not something that can be taught. That's just something, a core, natural. Either you have it or you don't. Okay. The second thing is, this you might learn later, but you have to have a really strong risk tolerance. Okay, because what I can guarantee you going in this entrepreneurial route is that you're going to fail multiple times. Okay. Some more than others, but you're definitely going to have a series of failures. So you have to have a really strong risk tolerance and be okay with failure. The third thing is you have to know what I would say probably your one core skill is. Maybe one or two. And again, these are not things that are teachable. For me, it was probably sales and communications. I knew I was really, really good. I was great on Mivtzaim. I was great in camp plays. I was great in all these things that through the yeshiva system that I knew I had this core skill, which was sales and communications. And because I knew those three things, that I knew what they were, and I knew that I had them, how I fell into my jobs, opportunity came. Hashem knows how to maneuver opportunity in your direction. The first job with David, he was a friend in yeshiva. The marketing job is because when I was selling to these businesses, I said, hey, I think I can make your advertising better. And then the next stage was currency. It was my brother. He's like, listen, Moshe, you have marketing skill. Let's try you out in the business. Then charity, it happened because it was another Lubavitcher. And then Hatch already, once I spent all those years honing my skills and harnessing the opportunity that was around me, at that point, I was able to say, okay, now I can make a move and move out on my own. I hope some of that was helpful for the.
Very good. You encapsulated that very nicely. But let's drill in, because you just went through the whole life cycle. So let's drill. First of all, any important lessons from your marketing job before currency? Anything that you experienced there that was an important lesson that someone could take out of it? Anything?
Yeah, I touched upon this story. I'll dive into it a little bit more, but I was selling advertising for the Algorithm, and I was in an office. I was in an office for a really large company, and I was selling him space. And the conversation went in. He's like, he's been using the same ads, putting in the same ads in the newspapers, then, and he wasn't happy with them. So in the back of my mind, I was listening. I could do two things right now. I can either say, this is not my job. My job is to sell you the ad space. My job is to not make you better ads. But in a moment in that office, I said, I took a risk, and I said, I can make you those better ads. I've never made an ad before in my life. I can make you these better ads. It's like, how do you do it? It's like, well, I have a copywriter, I have a designer. I hadn't have any of those things. And then I went back, and then I left the office, and he's like, okay, if you can make me the ads, this contract, we'll sign a contract. So I was like, okay, now I got to go make the ads. And I figured it out. So I think biggest lesson to me then was pivot quick, fast. Trust.
You had a confidence. You saw what you thought.
I think that has something to do with my last name, probably a certain confidence. And I wrote that confidence throughout that whole training. All those training years, I wasn't afraid to take risks. I was very ambitious, and I confident, yes, and also knew what I was good at, and knew my God-given gifts, and knew that I needed to hone them, develop them, and increase the value of their output.
Okay, so in those early years, while you were doing the marketing, you were also, side gigging. You were a musician. I mean, you were all in as a musician. And any words of wisdom for anyone that's listening who might be dabbling in that space? You have any comments you want to share about that part of life?
Don't do it. Don't do it. Listen, you gotta try things. It's very hard. It's very easy to say in hindsight, hopefully in your 20s, in your early days, you have some rope to try things. If you don't try things, you'll never know. One thing I know is I thought I was going to be on the cover of Rolling Stones magazine. That was an actual delusion that I had in my mind, that I actually thought that's where it was going to go. There was only one way to find out if it was possible. And now, obviously, it wasn't, or at least then. Maybe it's still possible. There was no way of finding out. You got to try things. I think the biggest lesson that I learned from doing the music is that you got to try. You got to try and find out. And hopefully you have some rope to do it. Yeah, you have some rope to do it. But you'll never know. You'll never know what can happen, and the lessons and the failures and the things that are going to happen with every single thing that you attempt to do, will be very beneficial for your future. I also learned some communication skills. It also honed some of my core communication skills. Taking an idea, putting it into a song, getting a band together, getting up on stage. This is all marketing. It's all communications.
Nice. It played to your core strengths. So
Absolutely.
there you are, and you moved in to currency. Tell everyone a little bit about what that startup was, and what's a lesson or something that happened along the way in currency.
Yeah, So Currency was a startup started by my brother Nassim Hecht, a serial entrepreneur. It was digital, without getting into much of the technical things, but it was a digital currency for the internet. This was when Bitcoin was, I think, under $15. I remember us sitting, and the way I know this is because we were sitting around the office and talking about Bitcoin at $15 and debating whether we should buy some. And I mean, we know the end of that story. I probably would be on this podcast, but it'd be a different narrative that we'd be talking about. So we didn't buy the Bitcoin, but that was an interesting time and very, very ambitious idea. A few lessons that I think I've taken away from there is number one, the company was brilliant. The concept was brilliant. It was way ahead of its times, and probably the single greatest lesson I learned there is that a company, an idea could be great on paper, but it really has to fit the times. It really has to have already an existing market where you can change behavior iteratively rather than trying to completely transform the way people behave. I mean, you have some of those innovations that happen every 20, 30 years, and some people do that, but for the most of us, innovation happens iteratively. So I think the company was just way ahead of its times, and it's helped me in all my future endeavors to kind of check myself, like, is this thing that I'm working on, is there a market for it right now? How much behavioral change are we going to need to enforce? And if it's massive, it's a massive quantum leap, then probably not a good idea. If it's an iterative leap, then it might have a chance. The second thing that I learned there, one of the big lessons I've taken away, is we used to do a lot of tabling. One of the audiences that we identified as potential users of the product were college students. So, Moshe Poltrak, who's also a supporter of CHYE, he was the head of marketing, and we decided that we need to be on the ground at these college fairs, these freshman fairs, to get signups. So we road tripped around America. We drove to OSU, we drove to Virginia Tech, we drove to all these universities to be there where the students were. We raffled things off, and we got a bunch of signups. I think it's fair to say that type of scrappiness in the early days of trying to build something, no matter how far the leaps of innovation are taking us, I think those are still things that need to be done. To bring on that early adopter community, you're still going to have, in some form or another, a ground operation. And that might be online, but it might be very targeted, very surgical ground operation, very one-to-one experience, getting those early adopters, all of those early things. In your early stage of business, advertising and spam emails and all these highly scalable tactics are not going to work unless you have your core base. So some lessons, definitely pulled some lessons from working at the Currency, no question.
Okay, so ultimately from Currency, you transitioned into now the ubiquitous charity company, which has taken the fundraising Jewish world and everywhere by storm, and totally transformed how organizations fundraise. But I had the privilege of seeing it in its infancy, and it definitely went through growing pains, to call it that. So how did you end up from Currency jumping into charity? What was your role there, and some lessons?
Yeah. I think charity was a direct gift from Hashem. It was like, talk about Hashgacha Pratis. Like, I think that was probably the first clear Hashgacha Pratis in my life, where I think God saw the struggle, and saw that I was making a shtadlus, and saw that I was not being lazy, about life and about trying different things and about exploring different opportunities, I think at that point, I think Hashem was like, okay, Moshe, now we're going to give you a little gift. And we're gonna set some clear pathways for you now that you've put in the work. Charity was started by Yehuda Gurwitz. In the early days, I saw some of the early activity that was happening, and I was like, "This, I gotta be a part of this. This is it. This is the future." And to me, it on a personal level, I've always had this dual struggle of a spiritual component of me that coming from the Hecht family and generations of rabbis and spiritual leaders and Jewish leaders, which is something that very much resonated with me. I did a shlichus stint. My music to me was very much a shlichus, but then I also had these creative, innovation, entrepreneurial ambitions, and for a long time they were conflicting. At one point I was singing, doing music at night, and selling advertised during the day. It's like it's a conflict, and there was a tension there. To me, charity was the fusion of these two tensions, where you're able to, the way I saw it, was build a really big, successful company, at the same time helping people help people, helping people raise money so they can continue to do good work, community work, whether it was Chabad houses, whether it was American Cancer Society. We were talking about people who were changing the world. So there was this beautiful symmetry of both of my worlds, and that was a God-given through natural causes, through Yehuda Gurwitz, through different. So that was very exciting. Charity was, to me,
What role were you brought in to do?
So originally I was brought in as head of sales, naturally, right? And then the company kind of went through some bit of a roller coaster. At some point, it was just me and the Gurwitz in the office through a lot of early challenges, and then we kind of rebuilt it from ground up. Made it into what it is today.
Are you able to share a little bit about how you rebuild when things go down, so to say? Like, is there anything that you could share about that?
I think we faced probably every challenge that early startups would face. I think there's a list somewhere. No money. There were a lot of security scares in the community that we were accused for. There was the whole fear that this whole thing was hype. We had to rebuild the technology multiple times. I think we went through like all of the classic challenges that early stage startups that either fail or make it, but they go through these startups. I think the reason why it succeeded is because the core early team, we believed in it that much. We had in probably an irrational, delusional belief and core belief that this is going to happen. And I think, and it's not like a belief, a pie in the sky belief. I think what we saw is as follows: we saw a wave was coming, or was happening already. That wave was all this, tzedakah was moving online across the board. Tzedakah was moving online. We saw a wave of opportunity where we understood what the core human motivations are for giving. And we saw that they were starting to happen in other crowdfunding platforms where you were able to recognize people through a feed, create some ambition, create some motivation through a clock, right? All of these things. So we saw a wave, and we asked ourselves, like, how can we ride this wave as best as possible? We became surfers, And I think any successful business is not creating the waves. The waves are happening, right? Right now you have the AI wave. You have, in the 90s, you had the internet wave. So we saw the wave was what was happening, and the trick was just to stay standing on the board for as long as you possibly can, and to make sacrifices. We made a lot of sacrifices. The early team made a ton of sacrifices to get through those early few years. But We knew the wave was happening. We knew that all we needed to do was, stay on that on the board and stay standing for as long as you possibly can through all the sacrifices, and eventually things took off.
Nice. I'll actually just ask two more questions about charity, and then we'll move on to Hatch. Number one, talking about competition. In the early stages of charity, other people try to jump on the bandwagon. How did you guys deal with that?
I think how every good business deals with competition is not focusing on them too much, but also simultaneously understanding your key differentiators very, very well. Yehuda Gurwitz used to say that we can do anything, but we can't do everything. Okay, so we could have the best tech and the best service and the best prices and the best, you can do all that, but you can't. So you have to choose. You have to choose what your key differentiators were, and those can evolve and pivot over time. But for us, the early days, the first few years, our key differentiator was service. So we knew that if we were available to get on, in the early days were shluchim, if they knew they can call us at 1 o'clock in the morning when their campaign was happening, there's no platform in the world was doing that. Okay, if we knew that if they don't have skills to do graphics, that we'll do it for them. Nobody was doing this. So we had a hyper vigilance on customer success, on customer service. That was our key differentiator. We were fully committed to that as being our key differentiator. It then became known. Listen, if you want a platform, there's a few options. But if you want someone to hold your hand throughout the entire process and make you feel good about that you're raising 10x more than you've ever raised in the past, that was our key differentiator, that we were holding their hands through the entire process. And I think that the ambition of the people at charity was something very contagious and something very unique. First of all, the whole setup of the system, 24 hours, all or nothing, quadruple matching. I mean, that was like holding the organization to a really, really high standard, but also telling them that you can do it, right? And then continuously, every salesperson that we hired had this kind of ridiculous ambition to have the chutzpah to tell a shliach, you've been raising X amount of money till now, or tell a massive organization, you've been raising X amount of money, but with this system, you can raise 10 times more. So we were constantly, and even till this day, till 2026, I think the greatest value of the charity is that they're constantly showing the organizations a possibility and a vision beyond that what they can see right now. And as long as you're taking people beyond their current imagination, you're adding value. So I think those were some of the things that set charity apart throughout its journey and continue to set charity apart in the market today.
So charity is still going strong, but Moshe Hecht is now the CEO of Hatch.
Yes.
So how did that happen? Why did you jump ship?
Well, it was COVID, and I was going through an existential crisis, like all of us. Essentially, what happened? I began to, well, there's multiple perspectives of this. I'll give kind of the perspective that I think the Chabad audience would appreciate. If you're living in a Jewish community today, whether you're Chabad, also if you're outside in Lakewood, in Bnei Brak, in Yerushalayim, if you live in any concentrated Jewish community today, you remember how started probably 2016, 2017, how the oversaturation of charity campaigns started to become a big concern. Obviously, the concern wasn't that great because their campaigns are getting stronger and things. So whether it was a genuine concern or whether it was just a emotional reaction to what was going on, but there was definitely a concern. There's definitely something. There was, it needed to be focused on, and I was at the heart of that. I was the one getting eggs thrown in my house. I was part of the problem. When you're part of the problem, and me being someone who likes to solve problems at a large scale, I started to naturally think about. By the way, do you see how this evolution is happening? How like every one of my roles led into another role? Because I keep an open mind. I like to solve problems and I like to create things. So Hashem is going to figure out his way how to serve up those opportunities. You just have to know that the opportunities are there. So
right, and I would just interject though, which we're hoping the listeners will get, is most of the best business ideas come out of solving a problem that you see unfolding in front of you, as opposed to just randomly pulling something out of the hat. Oh, let's try. It's so much, the success factor that happens is when it happens in the way that it's unfolding as you're describing now.
So there's oversaturation. Everybody's getting links for campaigns that weren't necessarily relevant to them, and it started to become a real issue. It started to become a real problem. And so naturally, I was like, well, can I solve this? If I was part of the problem, creating this problem, along with a wonderful team, but if I was at least a part of creating this problem, maybe I'm in a position to solve it. And I thought for many months of what the answer to this is. Ultimately, I went out into this, looked into the broader nonprofit space, and saw what are some of the solutions that could possibly solve this. And there was an industry called wealth screening. Okay, there are about 5 big players in this space. A type of service that collects public information on millions and millions of people, all public information from the IRS, the FEC, the SEC, mortgage holdings, to build a wealth signaling profile, to build a prospect research profile. Okay, and it was typically used in universities, hospitals, to identify rich people. Right, a university has 1 million people in their database from 50 years of alumni. You have a fundraiser who's looking to find rich people in their massive database. They use a wealth screening platform to identify who would be a good fit for this organization, how much they can predict, how much they can give, et cetera, et cetera. So I was like, that's interesting to be able to get intelligence on individuals. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could get intelligence on not just on the mega rich, but on everyone? And imagine if we could gather enough micro bits of intelligence on your average person, put all of that intelligence into one kind of profile and into one bucket, figure out from all those little pieces of data of what do they care about, what's their lifestyle like, what other tzedakahs are they giving to, what's their true capacity, right? What's their social network, all of the things that can predict the best opportunity, right? To move them away from getting every single opportunity like was happening then, and moving them into a world where the organizations were empowered to target them specifically for the things that they actually care about, right? And for the opportunities that they're actually very likely to say yes to. And that's where Hatch was born. So I went out and built a system where we're collecting data from over 30 different public sources, right? We're bringing it into one single location. We've built different AI-powered algorithms and scoring methodologies to essentially give the organization deep insight into who this person is, what they care about, what their lifestyle is like, what their capacity is like, what their propensity to give is, what their affinity is to your cause, and to give them predictive power so that the next time they're considering making an ask, starting a relationship, continuing a relationship, they're equipped with information that can help them build a stronger, more knowledgeable, more healthy relationship with donors. So that's how Hatch was born.
Okay, nice. So there you are. I mean, you're in charity, and you make this big jump to being a startup. I mean, to do that on that level, I mean, there's different ways, there's different roads that you could go down. There's being more of a traditional business, and then you're in the category of a tech startup, which means that you're developing a software and you require multiple rounds of funding. Why did you choose to put yourself into that category? Pose, for example, to charity, which is
charity for the
of a
most
traditional
part,
business.
Yeah, charity for the most part was bootstrapped. We did one round of funding, small round. But for the most part, it was a bootstrap company. Continues to be a bootstrap company. It wasn't on a venture funding track. The reason why I felt that Hatch needed to go in that direction is because I understood that in order to build the technology that I wanted to build, it was going to need a lot of resources and capital. And I wouldn't be able to, and even if I can build something iteratively and try to get those companies, I knew that for the first few years, I'm going to be spending a lot more than I'm going to be making. So, and I didn't think that I can get customers to catch up to that spend. And that's what every startup that decides to go the venture track to raise money is they have to have a realistic understanding of the technology that they're building and how much resources it actually needs, the technology to build. And I knew that what I was setting out to build was a very, very ambitious, highly cost, high cost, very expensive, both on the data licensing, to be able to get data to adhere to the highest levels of privacy, security, so licensing that data, building out the AI algorithms that we built to actually have quality predictions on individuals. I knew that we need a lot of capital for this, so we went to the venture route. Started off with an angel round of philanthrotechnologists, people who were both philanthropists and technologists. So we had a few core of those people. We got a few customers, showed a proof of concept, developed some level of product market fit, and then we were able to get another round, and Baruch Hashem, we're moving along.
So let's talk a little bit about just for people. This is something common that we see. A lot of people have these ideas like you had, but then they have no experience in tech. So how do you some people, it becomes a complete disaster. They hire the wrong people and they just blow their money and their ideas dead in the water. How are you able to find the right technical people and to be able to build your product? Do you have any wisdom you could share on that?
First of all, I am a little bit technical. So I do a lot of research. Okay. It's one thing to have ideas. It's another thing to then drill down into your ideas to see what the market looks like, how viable it is, what is the technology stack that you need to actually get this done. The more research you're going to do, the more you challenge your idea, the more the greater odds that you are going to succeed. And I have, from the beginning of this company, I knew where my shortcomings were. Okay, so the first person that I partnered with here had a PhD in data science. I have a PhD in nothing. I have a PhD in Miftzayim. So knowing where your gaps are is critical, right? And then finding people at the top of their game that are going to fit, that are going to create this wholesome enterprise was key. So from the very beginning of Hatch, I had a PhD on their team in the early days. I had someone who worked for the CIA and NASA on data, actually another Lubavitcher guy. I was able to scout out these real serious talents. So today I have an incredible, those people aren't with me anymore, and you evolved. They moved on. One guy started his own thing when he was here, once the whole AI boom started. Today I have an incredible product manager who has over 20 years of experience. So hiring really good talent and be able to identify real skill, real talent is a skill you have to hone. But I was able to, find the good people to fill in where I lacked. So I had the vision and I had the idea and I had the fortitude to see it through, but then I had to bring in the talent to actually make it happen.
Now, these people you hired, did you make anyone co-founders and share equity with anybody?
Yes. The short answer is yes.
And is that a strategy? Like if someone doesn't have the funds to pay making someone a co-founder? Do you find people buy in for that?
You have to be, yes and no. I mean, you have to be very careful. You know, the Rebbe's advice on taking partners to be very careful, and so every case is different, but it's definitely something that you need to consider as an option, especially in the early days where you don't have money to pay them. So you want to join them in sweat equity. You want to take some risk with you. But I can't say blanket, like, if you don't have the skills, hire a partner. Sometimes you don't necessarily want a partner. You just better raise the funds to hire them. So it really depends. For me, the level of skill that I needed was at such a high level in the very, very early days. There was no way I was going to be able to raise the money within that short period of time to hire someone to pay what they're really worth. So I partnered with people that were really willing to take risks with me, that were able to build that initial infrastructure.
How did you go about finding these people?
I hope people aren't offended by this answer, but if you have to ask that question, then then it's not for you. And if people ask me, like, not you, meaning if somebody has to ask that question, like, how do you go raise money? If you don't know, if you don't have a natural kind of tendency towards networking and finding the opportunities within your network and calling every one of your friends and uncles and past classmates and going onto LinkedIn and scouting and being just a natural hunter, and if you have to ask that question, then I don't think it's for you. I mean, you can call people for advice, for strategy. But
is there a platform anywhere where, like, people that are looking for technical co-founders? Is there a
platform? Yes, and a simple Google search will tell you that. So you know what I mean. So a simple Google search will tell you, find me a platform where I can find co-founders. Yes, there's all these. That's the point. The point is that all of these solutions are out there. What you need to ask yourself is, are you a natural hunter? And you're going to think, if you are a natural hunter, you're going to find these things, and Hashem is going to dance along with you, and He's going to help put these things into your lap. That's the best way I can answer that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about pivoting. So you had your original vision for Hatch, and you jumped into the world, and you got your initial customers. Sometimes you have to be open to to listening and being ready to pivot. So tell us a little bit about your experience with that in Hatch.
Yeah, so we had to do a really big pivot a little bit over a year ago, and this is where lessons of past travels sometimes will serve you, and then sometimes you're just going to have to learn the lesson all over again. So one of the ways that charity grew was that we started in our backyard. Right, we started with our brother-in-laws. Each one of us, our early teammates, had a brother-in-law that was Hanshlichus or a sister, right? We started in our backyard, and then networks effect happened where the board members of those Chabad say, hey, I have a Hillel. And so there was this beautiful network effect that happened until it became what it is today. So I was like, oh, that should work with Hatch as well, right? Let's do that. And it didn't. We had started off in the Jewish world with my book of business.
Right, and you leverage your background.
Yeah, leverage my network, which is the right way to do it. You should always do that. The challenge was that the technology did not, at least at that point, did not fit naturally into this community. And the main reason is, well, two main reasons. The technology wasn't there yet when we launched this thing 4 years ago. But at the same time, there was a personnel, a staffing that needed to be able to make this platform successful. That this entire SMB, small to mid-size businesses of nonprofits, just didn't have that staffing. So we tried for 2 years in this small to mid-sized business, thinking and hoping that we would create that network effect. And more than half of those clients just churned over time. Some of them are still with us because, for whatever reason, but a lot of those ended up churning. And I realized,
churn, by the way, for those listening, that means it's the technical term where they don't renew. Basically.
Yeah, they don't renew. Because they were hooked on the promise. If you can tell me everything I need to know about my people, and you're going to give me these AI predictions, and it was like, wow, this is an incredible thing. But at the end of the day, they got into the system, and the system needs a staff member devoted to getting the benefits out of the system. It was like trying to sell. Imagine you're trying to sell QuickBooks, which is like finance accounting software to a company that doesn't have a bookkeeper, doesn't have an accountant. It's like no matter how beautiful it is, if there isn't a staff member there to actually put in every single receipt and every single profit and loss, it doesn't work itself. So we realized that this is a research platform without selling it to organizations didn't have researchers. So about a little bit over a year ago, realized that we had to pivot and we had to go completely to the audience that we didn't want to, which was the universities, the hospitals, large federated organizations that were working with competitive platforms. We thought we would go to a completely blue ocean, the SMBs, the small businesses, completely blue ocean. They have very, very little competition there. We just gobble up the whole market. We realized that wasn't working. So we had to go take a risk of going up into the enterprise market, universities, hospitals, large federated organizations, that while it was hard to get them to sign up because they were already working with a competitor in this space, and it's like a red ocean, very bloody, but there's a lot of people trying to get the same customer, fighting over the same customer. We realized that was our only chance that we had for this thing to actually survive. And that's when everything started to take off. Where organizations were like, what the original customers were saying, that's an issue, I need someone to do this. They were like, well, this is what this person sitting next to me does every day. So the platform helped them get the job done, helped their employees accelerate their output of the job that they were working on. So that's where, in Baruch Hashem today, we have universities, hospitals, large federated organizations. Some of the biggest nonprofit brands in the United States are using Hatch. And
you're always looking for introductions to new ones. Yeah. So your ideal target market is, as you said.
So it's interesting today, actually, now that we've really focused on the enterprise market and we've built the product and advanced the product, we actually are starting to go back now that the product is much further along, our systems are much further along, AI is advancing in wild and rapid ways, and we're leveraging all the new agentic solutions and everything. We're actually now starting to go back to that original base strategically. Without getting too into it, but we're starting to go back to that original base, making if they have certain things set up, we can actually service them. My heart is in the Jewish nonprofits, specifically Chabad houses. Like that's what drives me every single day. That the Chabad world, and the core of my heart is that the Chabad world that I can be a part in advancing the Chabad world impact that they're making on the world. So. Not there yet, going back to them, but that's
amazing. And so just talking to our audience, for any of you that have relationships with large nonprofits, would love to, hit up Moshe, make an intro. Let's help our community startups flourish. Just here in our final few minutes of our conversation, is there any amazing story that happened along the way that just pushed you forward that you could share? Like we like to call it our K Factor Hashgacha Pratis moment. Something that you could share with us.
An amazing Hashgacha Pratis story. I'll tell you. I don't know if it's a Hashgacha Pratis story, but I'll tell you a story that gave me some perspective in life. In the I think it was at the end of the first year of my time at charity. Okay, things were going really bad. Things were going really rough. It was just early stage challenges. And I remember it was, I think in December at the end of the first year that I was there, and it was like, we thought December was going to explode. It didn't. I was talking to my wife. I'm like, listen, I got to find a backup plan over here. So I had met a fellow who was a big supplier, producer of tiles, one of the biggest in the United States. Somehow we got in touch, and he said, Moshe, I see you have such incredible entrepreneurial skills and sales skills and business acumen. I want you to come and start a new business that I'm starting, selling vanities. Vanities, I think you put in the bathroom. I said, okay. So I don't have. I this first time I even heard the term vanities. For me, it's a sink. Bathroom sink. But I had no choice but to take the meeting. So I figured if I could take the meeting, might as well take him to Basil. He was paying anyways. I figured I'd get a good meal out of it and see what the opportunity is. I had to take the meeting. At the very least, I had to take the meeting. We're sitting down and we're discussing back and forth, and he's telling me the opportunity. And then he asks me, "Are you passionate about vanities?"
Okay.
I didn't know if it was a quick question, if it was a trick question. Are people passionate about vanities? Oh, I said, nope, I'm not passionate about vanities. And then right there, I knew I lost the job. I couldn't lie to him. I'm like, I'm not passionate about vanities. But he actually said something interesting. He's like, of course you're not passionate about vanities. Nobody's passionate about vanities. But he said that you got to know, he told me, this is a great lesson for this entrepreneur told me. He's like, you have to know what you're passionate about. Okay. Sometimes the things that you're going to do are going to be, multiple steps away from your passion. So he said, I said, I'm not passionate about tiles. This was a larger company with tiles and vanity. He's like, I'm not passionate about it. He's like, I'm passionate about giving tzedakah. So if I can sell enough vanities and I can sell enough tiles, right, then I could make enough money so that I can make make enough money and then give to the things that I'm actually passionate about, right? So I stay focused when I come to work. Am I passionate about selling tiles and passionate about vanities? No. I realized at that point where there has to be passion to a degree into your business, right? You have to be passionate about into your business. To me, I've chosen a path where my passion is directly associated with the work that I'm doing. There's no multiple steps. I'm passionate about helping nonprofit organizations raise money so that they could continue to do their work. I believe that is the least steps. There's least steps there that I'm passionate. So I think anybody who's listening to this, they have to find the path of passion, right? You got to find your path of passion, right? By the way, that just came to me. That's the path of passion. You can use it, whatever. Where you have to be able to connect the dots and understand, like, what am I doing? People say you have to love what you do. Well, not necessarily. You just have to love doing it. Right? I don't love whatever you're out there looking to do. You don't have to love necessarily. You just have to love doing it because deep inside you understand that I'm doing this, which is going to, whether it's selling jeans online, whatever it is, I'm selling that so that I can make enough money, so that I can give my tzedakah, so that I can support my family. If you can find things, in my case, I've been blessed to find the least distance of the path where I know that I get up every single day. I'm literally directly helping nonprofits, but everybody needs to find their path of passion to be able to, in their mind, saying to themselves, I'm doing this because this is going to lead me to this, because that is going to lead me to that. If you do that, then you'll be happy. Then you'll be able to be successful in what you do.
That's wonderful and amazing. And this was a wonderful conversation. I hope that all of you enjoyed, and we wish you continued hatzlacha. We're looking forward to Hatch's continued success, to your A round, to your B round, to your exit. Emir Hashem. Tremendous hatzlacha. Thank you. And
thank you, Yeshua. I just want you to know that for everybody listening, I've a front row seat of everything that Crown Heights Young Entrepreneurs is doing. It is a critical organization in the community. I don't want to say that if it was around or if it was at its full iteration that it is today, when I was graduating yeshiva, then probably would have helped me more. But I've seen firsthand how you're helping people. In any way anybody's listening to support this critical organization, they absolutely should do so.
Thank you very much. Shukayach. Hatzlacha Rava.